you've understood it, that is the least of your challenges. The greatest challenge now is application. And the greatest, I believe, challenge of application is not applying it before 9 a.m. at your home, but applying it between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. when you're out in the world interacting with all the things in the world that are often difficult to interact with, and all the people that are difficult to interact with. That's where we say the rubber hits the road. You have that saying in England, the rubber hits the road? But you understand what it means. That's the real test of your understanding. Okay, before 9 a.m. you have sadhana. That's also part of your test. But most of the day is not sadhana. Most of the day is interacting with people. And that means living the Gita. So that's the real challenge. When I was a student, I was going to Bhagavad-Gita classes. And I think within a few weeks, I understood the basics. Because every class, they just said the same thing. You're not the body, you're spirit, soul, servant of Krishna, part and parcel. This world is miserable, you should go back to Godhead. That's basically all the devotees knew because the movement was young. So I heard that every class. Those 5 things. I heard some other things, but those 5 things, I heard every class. You should serve Krishna. You're eternally a servant of Krishna. Krishna is in your heart. Krishna consciousness is your nature. I'd hear that over and over again. So, after a month or so, I was very clear about that. But what was I doing after I heard it? Same thing I was doing before I heard it. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, all you need to kill your soul. So, hearing's not sufficient. So don't think, well, I study Bhagavad-Gita. Now I understand it. Yeah, how do we know you understand it? Let's say the last 3 months you all went to the Millionaire Mind Intensive, how to become a millionaire. Now, how will I know that you understood what went on in the seminar? The only way I'll know is show me your bank balance. Then I'll know. Because Madan could say, yeah, I know everything in that course. I could teach that course. I go, Madan, what do you got in the bank? And he, kind of negative zeros, negative few zeros there with a 1 in front of it. And you know everything? Yeah, I could teach it. I know it all. Have you ever been in a situation, if you haven't, you will be, where you have to teach something you don't do? Have you ever done that before? Like, Madan, could you give a class? I'm like, okay. And the class is about, don't sleep too much, don't eat too much. And all last month you've been eating too much and sleeping too much. And then you have to give the class. It's like, how can you give it? You can't give it because you don't really understand it. You only understand it in your head. So this is the big challenge for all of us, not just Bhagavad Gita students, but for all of us. The big challenge is we get it in our head. And once we get it in our head, we think, now I understand it. And it's one of the biggest illusions to equate intellectual understanding with actual understanding, because it seems when you intellectualize something, you've understood it. Doesn't it? Well, I understand that, that's really clear. I understand it. And so you could say, psych ourselves out to think we understand it because we understand it up here, but we don't understand it in action. So that's the real next step for all of you is, okay, you've understood it here. Now what? How are you going to translate that? Right? Now, for example, sometimes devotees say, I know Krishna says we should be humble. I know Mahaprabhu says we should be humble. But you can't actually be humble in the workplace, because if you are, people will walk all over you and you will never climb the corporate ladder. That's like, how many times I've heard that? Like 1,728 times every day. I hear this all the time. And now think about that. Think about that. You're reading a verse in Bhagavad-Gita, and there's some small print disclaimer under the verse, like Krishna says, you should be equal poised in happiness and distress, loss or gain, success or failure. And there's a little disclaimer. But not at the office, because if you are, you're going to get fired. So no, there's no disclaimer there. But in our minds, we start making disclaimers. Have you ever made a disclaimer and not realized you made it? Yeah, that's all nice, Krishna says, but you can't really do that. When you go out in the world, people will take advantage of you, and you're nice to people, and they're not nice to you. And you ever thought like that? Okay, I'll ask it the other way. Has anyone, raise your hand if you have never thought like that. Okay, that's a better way to ask the question. Then if I don't get any hands, that means I'm getting all hands. So, don't ever think that anything in the Bhagavad Gita is impractical. It's just a question of understanding, okay, how can I be humble in life and still do what I have to do? How can I be humble, still maintain my material life, be successful? How can I be kind, considerate, compassionate, Brahminical, sattvic, devotional, not just before 9 a.m. in my house, but 24/7? How can I do that and it's still at the same time do what I have to do? That's the challenge. We could call this the Gita challenge. That's the Gita challenge. Because once you understand it, this is the big stumbling block. Dissecting it in a way that you can actually do it and understand how to do it. This is, I see this like a huge problem, and it really became clear to me when I taught the forgiveness course. I have a forgiveness course. It's now online. Anybody can take it. And off my website, you can just go there and mahatmadas.com and then you can just go and take it. So many devotees have taken this course. And so many devotees were stuck with this resentment. They didn't know what to do with and how to deal with it. So basically what I did was I dissected it into steps. Do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, like 20 steps. And after I did it, I thought, this is really interesting, because you could probably take anything in our philosophy and make it like a 20-step program. How to be humble, 20 steps to be humble, 20 steps to be compassionate, 20 steps to say I'm sorry. How do I say 20 steps to, dissolving your false ego. The problem is we get it all philosophical and then we don't dissect it into practice. And then people would say, I need to take this course. And I would say, why? I said, because I don't know how to forgive. I don't actually know how to do it. So Krishna said, forgive. Krishna says, be humble. Krishna says, do this and that. And then we don't do it. And then we realize, I don't know how to do this. Have you had that experience? Like, this is what I'm supposed to do, but I actually don't know how to do it. So this is the Gita challenge. Okay, Krishna is saying you should do A, B, C, and D. How do you do that practically? What are the steps? What are the practices? That's what we need. Does that make sense? How many times have you heard in a class you should surrender to Krishna? Probably a lot, I would imagine. How do you do that? What does that mean? What does the word mean? What's the process? Am I surrendered? Am I not surrendered? Can I be more surrendered? How do I calibrate it on my surrender meter? I need to buy a surrender meter, I guess, and you're like, well, I don't know, put it again on my heart every day and check it. Oh, I'm not surrendered today. Like, how do I calibrate? I need to know these things. Otherwise, it's just an idea. Now, one of the things we do in our forgiveness course, which is so fun for me, not for the students. Well, hopefully it's fun after they go through the pain. So this is what we do. We ask them, like, what do you think you are? Like, tell me what you believe. Tell me who you are, what you value. So they all write down the list. This is what I believe. This is what I value. I say, okay. If I didn't know you believe that, I didn't know you value that, and I didn't even know you, would I figure that out if I, moved in your house and lived with you for 3 months? Would I come up with the same list just by looking at your life? It's an interesting question, isn't it? You say, I value studying Bhagavatam, and I live with you. Like how many times did I see you read Bhagavatam in that 3 months? It was like 3 times. But in your mind, you're saying, I value it. Interesting, isn't it? I value rising early. I never saw you get up early. Well, you thought it was early. 6 o'clock. I didn't think that was early. That's not early in my book. So, you understand what I'm saying? Like, if I'm following, like, I'll give you an example. I once took a songwriting class. And so we would write songs and then we would play them or read them to the other students. And the teacher wouldn't let us explain the song because she said, if you have to explain it, it's not well written. It should explain itself. So I'm looking at your life. If you have to explain to me what you believe, like I can't see it, that means you're not doing it, because I should be able to see it. Oh, you're up every morning, you're chanting, you're reading. Oh, this was on your list, that I value these things. And I see you're like really, really kind to everyone. It's on your list. I value being kind. But for another one of you, I might see on your list, I value being kind. And all day you're arguing with people, or you're trying to control people. So these are things we need to become aware of. And one of the challenges in becoming aware of this is just becoming aware of it, because the false ego is so big, it doesn't want to become aware of anything that's wrong with us. Have you noticed that? Like false ego has a filter, it's like anything bad, it kind of filters out so you don't see it. That's the duty of the false ego, is to filter out anything bad so you don't see it, or it looks good even though it's bad. So now you can't, sometimes we're trying to see ourselves and we can't even see ourselves because the false ego is like, no, you're fine. You're great. You actually do get up early even though you don't. Have you ever thought like that? Actually, I do this even though I don't do it. Have you ever thought like that? Like you're thinking this about yourself and then you kind of reflect on it and say, I think I'm like this, but, I'm always fighting with everybody. I mean, I'm always talking about loving relationships and devotee care and respect, but I'm actually fighting all the time with devotees. But I just don't notice that because it doesn't fit with what I think I am. We're good at doing that, like we're good at like not seeing what doesn't fit with the way we think we are, because if we saw it, it would kind of be depressing, wouldn't it? Yes or yes? It would be quite depressing. So, I mean, this is a psychological function that we're not always so willing to look at what's actually happening. So, imagine I go to your house and I don't know you. I don't know what Krishna consciousness is. I don't know you're a devotee. I don't know anything. And after I spend like a few weeks with you, what would I think you believe? What would I think you value by looking at your life? And if the answer is, you would totally understand Krishna consciousness just by looking at my life, then I say to you, congratulations. Your list on the left side, this is what I value. Your list on the right side, this is what I see you value, is the same. Now, many devotees who did this exercise had 2 very different lists. The list on the left of what they value, at least what they thought they did, and the list on the right, when they actually thought about what people would say about their life, was in some cases entirely the opposite, which is depressing, obviously, but very revealing. So I would like you to meditate on this for a minute. What would be on the list? What would be on my list after living with you? And would it be different than what's on your list of what you believe, what you value? Sometimes when I do this exercise, people run out of the room. It's like really hard. Anyway, you get the idea. You can, I'm sure you can see, most of you, there's some difference, right? So, well, so my question to you would be, not what did you learn from Bhagavad-Gita, but how can you dissect that and apply that moment to moment in your life? Then you've understood Bhagavad-Gita. Otherwise, you've only understood what the Bhagavad-Gita is, but you haven't actually understood it because you haven't lived it. Let me give you an example. Many years ago, I did a training. And it was a training how to facilitate seminars. And it was by one of the top, he owns a seminar company. He's one of the top trainers. He's a fantastic teacher. And one of the ways he trained us in the beginning to begin a workshop is to tell people that the worst thing you could think of when you enter this workshop is that when I start talking, you start thinking, oh, I know all of this. Like Madan, he's in the How to Make $1 Million workshop, and he starts hearing this and he goes, I know, I've heard all this stuff. I know all this stuff, And Madan's thinking, now, how am I going to pay my rent tomorrow, But he's thinking, I know all this stuff. So I'm just joking, Madan, I don't know. Maybe you're a multi-billionaire and I don't know it, But anyway, if you don't mind, we have to use somebody, so I just chose you. So I hope that's okay. So what he would tell people was, if you hear what I'm saying and you say, oh, I know that, your mind closes down. He said, what you actually mean is you know about it. You've heard it. You have that information. But unless you're living it, you can't say, I know it. Because only the person who's living it knows it. So if say, Madan says, no, I can prove I know this. I'll show you my bank account. There's way over £1 million in my bank account. Oh, then I go, oh, okay. You actually know this stuff, don't you? Yeah, I know it. I used it. It works. So if I don't live it, it just means I know about it. I've heard about it. I've studied it. I know the information. And so this is really, from my experience, I've been a devotee 51 years, and I don't think this is only relevant to devotees. I think it's relevant to the whole world. Because as I said in the beginning, we see this going on in the world all the time. We know what's wrong. We know what to do. And what happens? Bureaucracy, decade after decade, and it doesn't happen. And you're all young people sitting, why is the world like this? Why didn't they change it? Oh, well, when we were hippies in the 60s, we were telling them, change it. We knew what was wrong. And then all the hippies copped out and became yuppies and materialists and just, got their BMWs and destroyed the planet and, So they knew what to do and they copped out. And so that's a very, very common affair. So this is the challenge. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And I would just ask you that whatever you've learned, try to dissect it and ask yourself, if I am to live this, how do I actually do this? Right? And for example, Krishna talks about humility, 13th chapter, right? The items of knowledge, humility. Okay. So what does humility look like on a day-to-day basis? Let's start dissecting it. What does it look like? You do something wrong and you apologize. That's humility, isn't it? You say the wrong thing to somebody and you say, I'm sorry. That was the wrong thing. I shouldn't have said that. That's humility. I have 3 PhDs and you're a high school dropout, but I respect you because you are a spirit soul. You are part and parcel of Krishna. That's humility, right? Somebody younger than you with less education points out a mistake and you say, thank you, you're right, I did make a mistake. That's humility. So this is just what I've seen, and I'm trying to be funny because I don't want to offend anyone, and it could seem offensive, but I'm trying to be funny and real for the sake of educational value. So please take it that way. I think sometimes in spiritual circles, humility looks something like this. Hare Krishna Prabhu, you're so great, and I'm just a worm compared to you. And when I see your lotus face, I just feel like the most rotten, fallen, this or that. Like we feel like we're supposed to do that because that's humility, which of course is completely artificial, if not on the verge of some kind of mental illness, isn't it? So, humility is not artificial. Humility isn't an act. Like, some people are good actors, so they can act it out, Have you seen it before? Oh, Prabhu, I'm the most fallen, And the Prabhupada would say, you're not the most anything, be quiet, what do you want to be famous for? I want to be famous for being the most humble. What does it actually mean practically? And when you look at it, what it means practically, you realize, oh, okay, I have opportunities all the time to practice respect, to practice humility. What about tolerance? What does that look like? What does compassion look like? All these things. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a devotee 24/7? What does that mean in the terms of my thinking? When you start dissecting and practically translating that into this is how I would speak, this is how I would think, and this is how I would act, then you're arriving at a real understanding of the Gita. But if you keep it in your head, you can convince yourself you're actually doing it when you're not, and you won't even notice. I've seen this in myself. I've seen this in others. Have you seen this in yourself? Like you can actually think you're doing it, but you're not. And you don't even know you're not. That's the hard part. I ask you, have you noticed it? Half the problem is we don't notice it. If you notice it, that's a sign that you're at least being humble. So I've done this exercise with myself. I've asked myself questions about things Krishna said, if I'm to do this, what would it look like practically? What would I be doing point by point, step by step? What are all the aspects of this if I'm actually humble or respectful, or I'm actually surrendered, or I'm actually a servant, or I'm in the right consciousness? What would it look like? And then I start reflecting. And this is extremely valuable. So that would be my encouragement of taking the whole Gita into what I would call the 19th chapter. This is the 19th chapter. When you take what you've learned and you start applying it in your life. And then your life starts reflecting those instructions. One of the beautiful thoughts that I have is the greatest service you could do to Krishna, the greatest service you could do to any teacher is to make your life a personification of what they teach. That's the greatest honor you could give, isn't it? When I look at, I don't need to read the Bhagavad-Gita, I just need to look at you. Then I understand Bhagavad-Gita because you're living it. What could be a greater glorification of the teachings of the Gita than you live it, isn't it? So that's something, it's something I think about a lot. Okay. Here's the book, and here's my life. How much does my life become the book? How much is my life reflecting the book? How much would people understand about the book by seeing my life. Do you know how this movement started? One person. In that one person, they saw everything they needed to know. Isn't that interesting? Did you know that? That's how, this movement began with one person. Nothing else. No building, no Bhaktivedanta manor, nothing. Just one person. Within that one person, there was the complete geography, world map of Krishna consciousness they could see in him. He was the personification of everything he was teaching. How easy it was for them. Amazingly easy. So this is our goal. Now, I had another thought. That was thought number 1. Here's thought number 2. How much time do we have?
Till 9 o'clock. So about
half hour.
Half hour, yeah.
It's okay. So I'll be more brief about this, I hope, because I would like to give you opportunity to ask questions. Another thought I had about this, what I was asked to do is summarize Bhagavad-Gita, was that to understand Bhagavad-Gita, you need to understand something about Srimad Bhagavatam. And why do I say that? Because Bhagavad-Gita is kind of like the doorstep. You to get into the Srimad Bhagavatam, you have to go through the doorstep or the entrance. We could call it the entranceway. You have to go through the entrance hall. And the entrance hall is the Bhagavad-Gita. And I want to explain that. Since you study the Bhagavad-Gita, you know that Krishna is talking about all kinds of things in the Bhagavad-Gita, right? Talks about meditation, talks about working for him. He talks about renunciation, detachment through knowledge, giving up the fruits, doing your duty. Talks about all these things. And what's so interesting, I find so interesting about Bhagavad Gita, is that after he talks about everything, he tells Arjuna, actually, basically, don't listen to anything I said. You can just forget all that. And I think there's a strategy to that, is like, if I tell you, just do this, that's one thing. But if I tell you, well, there's 10 ways to get here, then I say, don't do any of those ways, it becomes a little more clear of what you shouldn't be doing. Rather, if I just say, do this, you may not be clear about what not to do. So Krishna's saying, you could do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then in the 18th chapter he says, actually, just surrender and basically everything I told you, you don't have to do. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? You ever thought of it that way? Like, why would he teach something and then tell you not to do it? That's actually a good sales technique. You show somebody, so many products, and you say, actually, they're not very good. I wouldn't buy any of them. This is why it's better. Because this one is better because it has this, and this, and this, and this, which none of these other products have. And all of a sudden, that product looks way better because you've now compared it to the other products. So Krishna's saying, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he's saying, actually, pure love is really what we're talking about. And you don't just want to meditate and just give up the fruits of your labor or, speculate philosophy or try to become one with me. You really want to love me. So the Bhagavad Gita kind of takes you to this point where, okay, it's about love. Krishna says, surrender to me. It's about relationship. That's where it's all going, right? I don't know if any of you have read Srimad Bhagavatam yet, but in the beginning of Bhagavatam, it says something quite interesting. It says, this book is only about pure devotion. It's not going to talk about anything else. That's all it's going to talk about. If you go to the Vedas talk about all kinds of things, like, everything under the sun and moon and above it also. It's like they talk about everything. And in the Bhagavatam, in I think the second verse, it says, we're not going to talk about everything. In fact, we're only going to talk about one thing. And this book is really only going to be of any interest to those who want pure devotion. That's who this book is for, and that's all we're going to talk about, is pure love of God. That's what it's about. Did you know that? So Bhagavad-Gita is like prep school for Srimad Bhagavatam. Now you've gone to prep school, and then you've gone and you study the Gita, and now you realize, okay, well, it's really about devotion, and devotion means selfless service. That's my nature. Serving without any other motive than to please Krishna. That's what it's about. Now you go into Bhagavatam, and you're just going to read stories about people who did that. One story after another about people who did pure devotion. And so you're learning about pure devotion through the lives of people who did it. In Bhagavad Gita, you're learning why you should come to that level. And in the Bhagavatam, you're learning about all the lives of the people who did that. And then there's one more book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is PhD work for bhakti. And so why is it PhD work? Not only are you learning about pure devotion, you're learning about the highest possible form of pure devotion. So Bhagavad Gita, you learn pure devotion is the goal. Srimad Bhagavatam, it's all about and only about pure devotion. And Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's only about the highest aspects of pure devotion, of pure love that's never been seen in this world before. So then, you know how, if you talk about love of God, it's such an amorphous statement. What does that mean to you? If I say to you, to any of you, love of God, it's like, what does that mean? You'll start feeling, it means, a feeling in your heart, or a generous feeling, or compassion, or it could mean so many things, right? But when you go to Bhagavatam, you actually see what it is in the lives of people who are loving Krishna. You get to see it. There's a story in the Bhagavatam, Krishna's dear friend, Uddhava. Any of you heard of Uddhava? He was a dear friend of Krishna. And he was living in Mathura, which is near Vrindavan. And Krishna told him, can you take a message to Vrindavan for me? To the people living there. Because Krishna had left Vrindavan. And they were all missing him. So he said, he sent Uddhava with a message. But the real reason he sent Uddhava was not to deliver a message. He wanted Uddhava to see the residents of Vrindavan because they had so much love. And he knew when Uddhava saw their love, it would affect him and it would increase his love. And when Uddhava saw the love of the residents of Vrindavan, he'd never seen anything like that. He was overtaken. So the Bhagavatam is that book which demonstrates that love through the lives of great devotees to help us understand ourselves, how to love, what it means to love, to inspire us to love. So Bhagavad Gita is just bringing us, trying to convince us that this is what we should be doing. And Bhagavatam is how will you do it? Through you study the lives of great devotees. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that takes you to the highest supreme love that's never been seen before. So I have a godbrother who is a scholar, professor. He's been teaching Bhagavad Gita in university for 20 or 30 years. And if you listen to him talk about Bhagavad Gita, this is what he'll say. He'll say, Bhagavad Gita is a book on love. And it's about how much Krishna loves you and how much he wants you to love him. He wrote his own Bhagavad Gita. And he wrote his theses on many high aspects of philosophy. And when he speaks about Bhagavad Gita, he sums it up this way. It's a book about love. How much Krishna loves you and how much he wants you to love him. That's it. And all the philosophy and everything you read was ultimately to bring you to the point of understanding That's what Krishna wants. He wants love. And what does love mean? Love means I want to please you, and I don't want anything from you. And the Bhagavad-Gita is meant to bring us to that point. You know, you read the verse 1866, where Krishna says, surrender to me. Did you kind of like feel weird when you read that word surrender? Like, uh-oh, surrender. Like, surrender really means, it has this connotation of like, I have no independence now. If I surrender to you, I'm basically your slave. You control me, right? But it actually means, in this context, it actually means love. Krishna says surrender, he means love. And I have a new translation for this verse where Krishna says, give up all religion and surrender to me. My translation is, I love you, will you love me too? That's my translation. And to me, that's the essence of the Gita. If you want to put the Gita in one sentence, I love you, will you love me too? It just took 18 chapters to convince us that that's what we need to do. So why don't I stop here and see if there are any questions. I don't know if you were expecting me to say all these things, but I think these things are very important. I see they're like sometimes maybe undermined a little bit, or we don't focus enough on them. So, but you can ask questions on anything you like, if you like.
Thank you so much, Mahatma Prabhu. That was really amazing. And for me as well, it's an amazing realization. I definitely started thinking about, do I do the things I'm saying? So that's very, I'm going to reflect on this. We've had some questions in. We've had actually the same question twice. So I guess we can ask this one first. So Arti and Prashant have both asked this. So you mentioned before about others asking how to be humble at the workplace when you need to climb the corporate ladder. How can you achieve this without others taking advantage of you? And Arti says, especially women in the workplace, a very dominant environment. And Prashant asked the same thing. How do you stay humble amongst karmis who aren't humble?
Well, let's start with the premise that not being humble is never good. And the next thing we need to do is we need to define humility, because I think this is where everybody gets hung up on. We're not defining humility in a spiritual sense. We're defining it in a material sense. Was Arjuna humble? Yes, he was humble. He's Krishna's friend and devotee. He could not be humble. Well, how do we know he's humble? Because he did what Krishna said. And what did he do? He killed people. Wait a minute, how? You can't kill and be humble at the same time. Well, if God tells you to kill and you don't kill, then you're not humble. And if God tells you to kill and you kill, then you're humble. So if we define humility as acting per the instructions of Krishna, then even killing is humility. And so if I always remember I am a humble servant of Krishna, then if I stay in that consciousness, I'm not the doer, I'm not the controller, then if I have to act in what appears not to be a humble way, I am acting out of humility internally. But externally, I may need to take another face in order to protect myself or execute my seva. So humility is we want to think of it more as a state of consciousness than just analyzing it as a state of action. Because some actions which are actually humble don't look humble. Like Prabhupada yelling at somebody who was criticizing, who's blaspheming Krishna. It doesn't look like Prabhupada's humble. But he's protecting Krishna. Someone is trying to harm your child, and you do whatever you can to push him away or her away, protect your child. That doesn't mean you're not humble. You're humbly protecting your child. And humble is a state of consciousness. So I think if you focus more on understanding the consciousness of humility, then it'll start to make sense to you how to be humble in the workplace without letting people walk all over you. You have certain goals to do. You're paid to work for a company and achieve certain things. If people walk all over you, you can't do your job, right? So sometimes out of humility to the owner of the company, you have to make things right so you can do your service. Because I'm trying to humbly serve the company. They're paying me. And it's my job to serve them. And this coworker is getting in the way. So I have to get him out of the way. And that's a manifestation of, or whatever you have to do. And it's a manifestation of my humility as a servant of the company, isn't it? So it's a mentality. If we think of it more as a mentality, I think then you'll get it. I'll give you another example of forgiveness. You know, if I forgive somebody, does that mean I have to move in the house with them? No. It doesn't mean you have to do that. Forgiveness is a state of consciousness. You may choose to have no relation with that person, but you no longer hate them. You no longer have resentment. The resentment's gone. You just choose not to be near them. It's not safe to be near them. They could be harmful. Could be dangerous. So you're still forgiving. You just don't want to be near them because it's not healthy for you. So your actions and your actions don't always reflect consciousness. If I say, I forgive you, Madan, I forgive you, and but I really don't want to talk to you anymore. And then he'll think, he didn't forgive me. He doesn't want to talk to me. No, I did forgive you. I have no ill feelings towards you, but I feel uncomfortable now being with you. Let's say Madan stole we were business partners. He stole all the money. I just this was traumatic. I can't deal with this. So I forgive him. Okay, whatever. But I have to decide on the actions I want to take. So the actions and the consciousness don't always merge in the way you might think they would. So I would just ask you to meditate more on what humility means essentially and how to maintain that. You're having trouble at work. You know, people are walking over you. Krishna, please give me intelligence how to deal with this. That's humility. I'm taking a humble position. Krishna, guide me how to deal with this. I have an obligation to serve this company. Show me how I can do it without hurting anybody, without offending, or whatever I have to do my job in the best way, so that, that's humility, to be concerned about the best interest of the company, isn't it? So that's general idea. Is that okay? I guess it'll have to be okay for now, because if we go more, then we need a couple hours.
Thank you. I definitely relate with that. And I've had a difficult situation, I think last week, where I had to speak to someone, and it was balancing between being nice and then that person being affected, but then also working for the company. It was, it was difficult, but like you said, you have to act in the best interest of the company.
And sometimes you can say, this is difficult for me to say, but I just want to be honest. This is how I feel. And, I know I'm not perfect also. And, maybe it's just me and there's nothing wrong, but I just, when you treat me this way, this is how I feel. And so, that's humility. It's just being vulnerable, right? But you're actually telling that person that, you don't want to be treated this way, right? That can work. So the biggest here, okay, you want to hear something really funny? Well, I don't know if you'll think it's funny, but I do. So South Africa, 1982, I was in South Africa, 81, 82. As you probably know, or some of you know, there's a beautiful temple in South Africa, in Durban. So devotees were collecting money for that. And going out raising funds, doing business, it's kind of a passionate activity, isn't it? You gotta, be doing stuff and convincing people. So this one devotee, he would chant Hare Krishna in the morning, chant on his beads, and then he would go out to do business, and he would play in the car rock and roll music to get like excited, to get in the mood. So sometimes we make that mistake, like we feel we have to go lower. We kind of have to go to the level everyone else is at to be in the frequency. But from experience, I can say, stay above the frequency that everyone else is at. You'll do much better. And they will do better also. And your solutions will be much better as well. Don't you think the corporate world needs more sattva guna? Needs more spirituality? I think it does. And so, it's so easy to come down to the level of everybody else. It doesn't really take much to do that. But to maintain your consciousness in spite of those difficulties, that's the challenge, which is what tolerance is all about, isn't it? Okay, we have more questions.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, we do. So this question came in from Dharmendra, and he's asked, I guess similar to what you've talked about, what 3 key changes should one make after reading the Gita to benefit the soul, the environment, and then the people around us?
Yeah, I would say this has taken me like 50 years to come to this conclusion, but I would say how should we say it? Understanding yourself, like being introspective. Because until we come to that, how can we really apply the Gita unless we are able to calibrate how much we're following it? So that's that introspection of looking at what Krishna's teaching and how well I'm following it. That having that vision, that objectivity, internal objectivity. And I can say this: it's so easy not to follow what Krishna says. It's so easy. You don't have to think about it. You just live your life as you always have for the last billion lifetimes, and you'll perfectly not follow what he wants to do, even if you're following it before 9 a.m. in your house. But then you go out into the world, it's so easy not to follow. It actually takes a lot of work to follow, doesn't it? You're late for work, you're running for the tube, and you get there, and then you're just about to jump on, and it goes off. And it's like, and how do you feel? Like meditating? Om Shanti Shanti. No, I don't think so. It's like, ah! So at these moments, we're like, okay, what did I learn in the Gita? 2nd chapter, 3rd chapter, 4th chapter, what was it saying? Don't be affected by duality, by happiness and distress, good, bad, success, failure. And all that happened was as I missed the train by 10 seconds, and I'm ready to destroy the universe. We have to be able to reflect like that and say, what did I learn? After 3 months of studying the Bhagavad-Gita, I'm ready to kill somebody because I missed my train. And what I'm talking about is true, because this is what we all do. Isn't it? Right? And so I say introspection, being able to see when I'm following and when I'm not and how I should be. This is the real thing. If you develop this, then your life is going to be much, much, much different. And if you don't do this, generally what people say when they don't do this, they say things like, well, I'm just human, and how can you expect me, and I'm not that spiritual, and a whole list of reasons why they can't do it, which is not true. You can do this, but you have to be introspective, and you have to have a little desire to be better, to do it. I can say it's difficult. I've been doing this 50 years plus, but I can say it's the best thing to do. It's difficult, but not as difficult as not doing it. And that's an important mantra. It may be difficult to follow everything Krishna says in the Gita, But it's not as difficult as not following, because the ramification of not following makes your life extremely difficult. And the ramification of following makes your life amazing, because now you're in control. You have tolerance. When things don't go your way, you can deal with it. You don't need to blame somebody. You don't need to complain. I was just reading the other day, you've probably read things like this, where people are complaining about the people who are getting vaccines. They're like, really? Have you seen that? They're really, really upset. You know, this is like scamdemic. It's all this, it's all that, and now they want you to get the vaccine, and it's so bad for you, and these ingredients, and on and on and on and on. And when I look at that, I'm not looking at the pros and cons of that. I'm just thinking, why would anybody want to get so flustered and upset about that? I mean, if you're going to get upset about something like worth actually getting upset about, like all the people in the world who are suffering or something. So I think, these are things we have to look at when we're, writing some nasty comment somewhere on Facebook or on YouTube, like, what did I just do? Here's my joke, after you do something stupid, then I ask you, hey, what verse was that? What verse did you learn to do that? What verse taught you to do that? That's the joke. So you can ask yourself these questions. When you do something stupid, you go, what verse was that? Oh, that was chapter 2, verse 7, anti-verse. I just did the opposite. So, you need this kind of reflection to really imbibe the Gita.
Thank you.
Does that make sense to all of you?
Thank you, Mahatma Prabhu. I have another question from Reena, and she's asked, so according to the Gita, the soul is eternal, it can't be affected by any of the elements. So her question is, why is that when the soul is in the body, why does it keep succumbing to Maya and the effects of Maya? Why does Maya even exist?
Okay, the body. Why does Maya exist? Only one reason. We want it. We want her to exist. Maya's like kind of like a stockbroker for the, you want to come to the material world and you need like a stockbroker, a realtor, an agent. So she's the agent to get you going, to connect you like with all the things you want to do. So Maya only exists as an agent for us because we want it. And then the soul's pure. Why are we covered? Because we want to be. And I'll give you an example. And it's a funny example. I didn't come up with this example, but it's a funny example. So the young boy, is in love with the girl. It's in high school, and they go home together, and they get in the house, and their father's there sitting in the living room, or you call it the lounge, right? You call it the lounge? You call it living room or lounge? Lounge. Same. We call it living room, lounge. It's the main room in the house. So you're sitting there, you come in with your boyfriend, and your father's sitting there. And then you say, well, we're going to go upstairs in my room. And your father says, no, just stay down here. He says, I won't bother you. I'll just be reading the paper. So he's just reading the paper. But what can you do with your father in the room? You can't do anything you wanted to do, right? Yes? So, you come into the material world to imitate Krishna. It's a problem if Krishna's in the room because you can't really imitate him while he's in the room. It's better you leave the room, or just ask him to leave the house. Now, let's say you want to enjoy this world, right? You've got all your plans. I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. I'm going to marry this one. We're going to get a house here. I'm going to get this job, this car, etc., 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 right? You got all these plans. Now, what if I come up to you and say, well, those plans are nice, but you could die at any moment, And actually, this woman you're marrying, she could have some fatal disease that just comes on, just like out of nowhere. And you could have children that have diseases also, or mentally disturbed, like, what would you tell me? You say, could you just get out of here? You're really depressing and annoying. Could you get out of here? So we come into the material world to enjoy, right? And Krishna's saying, no, you can't enjoy here. And we're saying, Krishna, could you not bother me? Like, I don't want to hear that, right? So what Maya does is she comes in and she's like builds this wall between you and Krishna. So now you don't have guilt, shame, or anything, because Maya's just kind of covered the whole thing. So it's just you and her, and like, let's go for it. And she says, everything's going to be great, and you're going to live forever, and you're going to be happy. And you don't have to worry about anything else. And just in case you're just concerned, go to the temple and give some donations just to ensure that you'll be healthy and happy. And so Maya covers us because it's the only way we could try to be happy. Because if we know what's actually going on, how are you going to enjoy this world? You can't. You wake up every morning thinking, today's the day. What day? What day? Today's the day I could die today. And your mother's going, that's a morbid thought. And you go, yeah, I know, but that's what it says in Bhagavad-Gita. And if you don't want the morbid thought, just put the Bhagavad-Gita in the closet and just like try not to think about those things. And then Maya comes and says, oh, no problem. I'll just make you forget. Everything you read in the Bhagavad-Gita, erased. You won't think about it. So that's why Maya exists, just to erase knowledge so that you could live in a little bubble. Because otherwise, if you know what's going on, it's kind of miserable. If you're not Krishna conscious, pretty depressing, isn't it? If you're Krishna conscious, you can deal with it. It's actually not depressing at all. It just becomes an impetus. So Maya exists to cover us because we want to be covered. So, because we don't want the father in the lounge while we're there with our boyfriend. So Maya convinces your father to go out in the backyard and, mow the lawn or something. And then you can do your hoochie coochie in the living room and he's not going to notice. That's basically how it works. Hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this. Because American humor could offend British people, I think. I don't know, maybe we're too straightforward or something. But this is just exactly what's actually going on. I'm not making this up or trying to be funny. It's just how it is.
It's really amazing examples. Thank you. Do we have time for a few more questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a question from Ashok, and he's asked, how do we uplift someone who does not believe in God when their personal feelings and emotions cover their intelligence?
Well, you may not be able to. Sometimes nature has to take their own course and people have to come to their own realization. But I would say, in spite of that consideration, if you feel the person may be willing to learn, I think the best thing is by your example. What if I said to you, you should chant Hare Krishna because it'll make you really happy. And you're looking at me thinking, I'm not going to chant Hare Krishna because I'll end up like you. You look miserable, right? So, have you ever seen that? Someone telling you how something's going to make you happy, and he's like, oh my God. It's like the Christian that says, if you don't surrender to Jesus, you're going to hell. And then you ask him, are you going to heaven? He says, yeah, well, I'm not going there if you're there. Because if everybody in heaven's like you, count me out. So it's something like that. So you have to. You ever felt that way? If all these guys are in heaven, I hope I don't go there. So, I feel like sometimes nothing works. Well, prasadam, when all else doesn't work, prasadam works. Get a gulab jamun and just stick it in their mouth. That can help. But a good example is also important, right? Because it's really hard to convince anybody of anything if you're not happy in doing what you're telling them to do. isn't it? It's like you're eating something and you're saying, this is really good. You should try this. You know, you're like, what are you talking about? You know, it looks like this is like, bitter medicine. So, but if you're eating something, like, oh my God, it's so good. It's delicious. You should try it. Then you want to try it because you could see. So that's sometimes all you can do. That and prasadam. And being nice and loving and kind and generous and compassionate. And, you want to hear something funny. It's not funny, but it is funny. It's sad funny, It's sad, but funny. When I became a Hare Krishna devotee, I was at the ripe old age of 19. And I didn't know a lot. I didn't know. I never met an Indian in my life. Well, I saw a few Indian women on campus. I never had actually talked to an Indian, and I only saw maybe 2 in my life. Then I became part of a movement that was Indian by culture, but I didn't know because it was in America. There was nothing Indian about what we were doing. So now I forgot what I was going to say. Funny. Oh yeah, so funny. So then we would become devotees, and then we were so excited about what we found. We read the Bhagavad-Gita, and for us as Americans, we never heard Bhagavad-Gita. We never heard, you're not the body, you transmigrate. We never heard this stuff. We were so excited, we'd run home and tell our parents, you are all in total ignorance, and you should read Bhagavad-Gita. You're like stupid idiots, an illusion, And this is what we would tell our parents, and our parents would think, "Oh my God, that's what this movement has done to you? This was like the worst thing that could have ever happened to you. You were such a nice person. You started chanting Hare Krishna, and now you become like a madman." So, it didn't happen all the time, but it did happen. And you ever seen a religious person who's not that nice? Not good branding for God, is it? God's had some bad branding, hasn't he? In the Christian religion, a lot of it. So, I always feel that the branding, you're saying this is a beautiful philosophy, well, brand it with your life. Let people see it. That's the best thing you could do. And if you become a zealot and a fanatic and tell everybody they're stupid, what are people going to think? Like, I don't want to do this. I'll become like you. You want people to look at you and say, I want to do this because I want to become like you, because you are amazing. Right?
Thank you so much. I actually can think of an example in my life where I introduced a friend who was a Hare Krishna to another friend, and he asked me even before he knew Hare Krishna, saying, "Why is he so miserable?" And I was explaining, "Oh no, he's a devotee. He chants this. What is that? Obviously, it's not working." And it just made me think, "Oh yeah, but yeah."
Because he's a brahmachari and he wants to get married. That's why he's miserable.
I think so.
You have to be properly situated.
We've got 2 more questions. One is about karma and dharma. So Niels asked, if karma and dharma always has and will exist, then does that mean that everything is pre-planned? Then where is free will? We may think that we have it, but doesn't the Supreme Personality of Godhead has the master plan?
Just because he knows what you're going to do doesn't mean it's pre-planned. He just knows the independent choice you're going to make before you make it. So you always have free will. That we have to start with that point. Karma, the law of karma is you get what you deserve, good or bad. If it's all predestined, then there's no karma, because it wouldn't make any sense. And if it's all predestined, there would be no judgment. Plus, you couldn't be judged because you're not responsible, because it was already destined to happen. So you have no control over it. So I think it's obvious that that's not true. you do something stupid and you go, don't blame me, it's in the stars. It was already predestined. I'm just carrying out what the stars are telling me to do. How does that work? You just killed somebody and tell that to the judge. The judge is going to go, oh, okay, all right, you're free, you can go. No. So we always have free will, and we're always responsible for our actions. The fact that Krishna knows how we're going to use our free will, well, he knows everything. Doesn't mean we didn't use our free will, because he knows how we're going to use it. Like, the little kids playing, and they always play and they do something stupid, right? And you're watching them play and you're thinking in your mind, he's going to do this and he's going to fall off the curb and he's going to hurt himself. And like a minute later, that's what he does. But it's not like it was predestined because you knew it. It's just you knew he was going to do that because he always does it. Does that make sense? But I'm not sure what was asked about Dharma, but nothing's predestined. We always have free will. That's the definition of jiva, which is the soul, is that it has free will, which distinguishes it from matter, because matter doesn't have free will. So what's the difference between you and a stone? You can get up and go anywhere you want. The stone can't, because you have free will and it doesn't. So that's the difference between life and matter. It has free will. So for us, the fact that we're alive means we have free will. And so if we didn't, we'd be stones also, right? Now, some people don't use their free will. That's another thing. But we all have it. Or they misuse it. Okay, what else?
So the next questions are about japa. This is from Meena and Smito. So they've both asked, can you describe your experience while chanting Krishna's name? And Meena says, can you advise what we should focus on, our attention on when chanting our rounds, and how do we control our mind when doing japa?
Before I answer the question, we're having, Jai Radhe, can you put the advertisement up? We're having a japa retreat online. So it's going to be 2.5 hours on Sunday the 18th, 2.5 hours on the 25th. I'll try to give you like a shot in the arm, but if you can come to this retreat, it's going to help you a lot. I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Most devotees are not actually chanting. It just looks like they're chanting. And that's a pretty heavy thing to say, isn't it? Almost sounds offensive. I just, right before this class, I just received we have so many people already signed up for the course. And I think, 80 or 100 have signed up already. And so we asked them, well, what are your challenges? So I was just reading probably from about 80 people or 70 people, their challenges. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, you're not chanting Hare Krishna, because you wouldn't be saying these things if you were actually chanting. So what I experience, what you're supposed to experience when you actually chant, is a connection with Krishna, which is extremely deep, sweet, relishable, amazing, and tasteful. That's if you're actually chanting. When you're not chanting, actually, and you're just chanting just to get a number done, then pretty much you're experiencing the same thing a robot would experience if they were chanting, which is nothing. Boredom, mind wandering. If I say, what is your challenge with japa? What are you going to tell me? Mind wandering, distracted, I can't focus, I get bored, I don't feel anything, I get tired, I fall asleep. That sounds strange, doesn't it? We've gone to the holy ceremony to worship the Supreme Lord. in the temple, in the church, in the mosque. What was your experience? Well, I kind of got sleepy and bored and tired, and I was waiting for it to end. That sounds quite offensive, doesn't it? And we'd be thinking, what were you doing in there? What were you listening to the football game or something while the sermon was going on? Like what's so? I'm reading these things and thinking, this is so unfortunate. So the more I was reading it, it was just reminding me of what I already know, that a lot of us, when we chant, we never actually really learned how to chant. We just started chanting, kind of like a robot would chant. Well, just chant. Well, how do you chant? Just chant. Just chant and hear. That's very mechanical. Just chant and hear. We're actually chanting as a prayer. So if you flip from just chanting a number to prayer, then you've just flipped into another dimension. Prayer for what? Well, then I ask you, if Krishna were sitting in front of you, what would you ask him? Don't tell me you'd ask him for a Mercedes. No. What would you ask him for your spiritual life? And say, well, I would ask help with this and to be more pure and so I could help other people. And exactly, that's what you would ask. The chanting of japa is a conversation where you're putting your heart out, asking those things of Krishna, praying for that. If you do that, what do you experience? Pretty much the same thing you would experience sitting in a room alone with Krishna if you were telling him all those things. And he was saying, yes, I understand. I'm going to help you. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? That's what you're supposed to experience. But if you're just chanting because, well, why are you chanting? Because I'm supposed to. Because my mother wants me to do it, or the leader of the Gita class, he said we should chant. That's why I'm chanting, but I don't really like it. It's like you totally missed the boat. It's like it's like the kid learning to play violin. Who's like, why are you playing violin? Because my mother told me to. Do you like it? No, I hate it. As opposed to the kid that's like been introduced to classical music and the greatest violinist and like, why do you play violin? I love it. It's amazing. So we need to understand what we're doing. We need to understand what the holy name is. We need to understand the frequency, the meaning, the mood, all these things. And then it changes. But if you just chant, then not much happens because you're just chanting. You know what I mean? Well, you probably know what I mean. If you've chanted that way, you definitely know what I mean. And if you've ever experienced the holy name deeply, then you know what I mean also. So, what do I experience when I chant? There's different days, but if the day is good, I would just say it's special. You can't experience what I experienced chanting, what you could experience chanting. You can't experience it with anything else because you're connecting with Krishna. Chanting is not a ritual. It's not a process. It's a relationship. That's what you're supposed to experience, the relationship. So if you're just experiencing a process, yeah, you're going to get bored. You have to sit down over and over. That's going to get boring, isn't it? All right. Let's everyone get our beads out and chant Coca-Cola. Let's see how far we get. Coca-Cola, 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 Coca-Cola. Cola, 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 cola. You ever chanted and felt pretty much like you're chanting Coca-Cola? It was kind of, and I know this sounds funny, but I truly believe that sometimes the experience people have chanting Hare Krishna is non-different than what they would have chanting anything. Baby, I love you. Baby, I love you. I love you, baby, baby. Just like. You go crazy saying it over and over again. It'll drive you nuts. Coca-Cola, 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 Coca-Cola. How long could you say that? Without, you'd end up like running out of the house screaming, isn't it? So if we're chanting but we're not entering, then we're not actually chanting. And it's just like saying anything. And that's why we don't taste it. But when you enter into the meaning, you understand that this is a prayer, this is a call for connection, for help. I just made a recording which has Prabhupada chanting and the different meanings of the Maha Mantra every few minutes. So we're going to do that during the retreat, where you chant, then I guide you. This is the meaning, and just enter into this meaning while you chant. And every minute or so, I remind you and then present another meaning. Then you start to experience, oh, that's what chanting's all about. I didn't know that. It was actually much deeper than I thought. So that's kind of, maybe that's just an advertisement to the workshop. So, but I've seen from teaching this how it has changed people's japa, like sometimes within a half an hour, just like you know, you're trying to hit the target, right, with your arrow, and you keep missing, and I go, no, it's like this, aim it this way, hold it this way, look this way, put it like that, and oh, you hit the target. Oh, that's how you do it. I didn't know. So I hope to give that experience in this course, like, oh, that's how you chant japa. Oh, now I'm hitting the target. Oh, this is what japa is. Oh, yeah, this is much better. You ever had that experience? Like you're doing something wrong and someone comes and corrects you? And it was so hard to do until they correct you. And you go, oh, that's how you do it. Oh, now I understand. Or some difficult subject like statistics or some kind of math, and you're brain dead in math, and then someone shows you, oh, okay, now I got it. So that's what I hope to do. So if you go to the chat, there's an ad, or on my Facebook, there's an ad. And it's only like £5 or something. Best deal in town. And you might just get a new holy name, a surcharged Maha Mantra, which would be priceless. Don't you think?
Thank you so much, and I'm actually really looking forward to this course. So I encourage everyone to join, and I'll post it on our WhatsApp group as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's the end of our questions, Mahatma Prabhu.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone for joining today. And it's been such an amazing session. Lots of comments come in, and it's been the best way to end our Bhagavad-Gita course. We normally do an after party Nasinga Day of prayers.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to lead us, Prabhu, or...
Sure, why not?
Thank you.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Praladala Dadayane. I think we need to mute everybody, right? And I'll sing twice. You can mute yourself and I'll sing twice. Hiranyakasipurvakshaha. Hiranyakasipurvakshaha. Shilatanka nakalaye. Shilatanka nakalaye. Ita nisinga parato nisinho. Ita nishinga parato nisinho. Jato yotoyami tato nishinha. Yato yotoyami tato nisingha. Here nisinga, hirae nisingo. Bahir nishinga, Hridaye Nisingam Nishingam Adim Sharanam Prapadye Nishingam Adim Sharanam Prapadye Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Abhuta Singham Dalita Hiranya Kashipu Tanu Bringham Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Tavakara Kamala Vare Nakam Adbhuta Singham Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringham Eshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Nishingadev 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 Jai Nishingadev 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 Jaya Nishingadev Nishinga Bhagavan ki jai, Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Thank you all for staying so long and tolerating my being American. I like, philosophy is so heavy. I like to make it light sometimes by making it funny. And we actually learn better when it's fun. So hope you've learned something and had fun. And hope we see you again sometime when I come to your great country, whenever that is. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mahatma Prabhu. That's been such an amazing session and just the best way to end our Learning Gita sessions. So thank you so much. We're all really grateful. So just a reminder, next week we'll have a quiz. So please all join for that. And before Mahatma Prabhu goes, I think if you can all unmute yourselves and thank him and say Hari Bol, that would be really nice.
Prabhuji,
Haribol.
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 Haribol, Hare Krishna.
Haribol, Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Haribol.
Prabhu.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hare
Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice listening to you. I've signed up for the Japa course.
Fantastic. You won't. You
Yeah,
should
we
all.
like American accent.
You should all sign up. It's only 2.5 hours on two Sundays.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Small investment. Let me tell you something about Japa course. I've been teaching Japa for about 15 years. So after you teach something for 15 years, normally it would take you like 10 to 15 hours to teach something. But after you teach it for 15 hours, you can kind of get it out in 5 because you've condensed it and you know it so well. So you're actually you'll get a lot. I couldn't have done this 15 years ago, given so much in 5 hours. But through the experience I've had, you can benefit from that. So it's not a big time investment. And we have about a 25 lesson online Japa course that I'm just completing right now that will come out maybe in a month or so, depending on when we finish it. And that will be of tremendous value to you as well. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Have a
Hare
good
Krishna.
night.
Haribol.
Stream of Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Sophia. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.